Okay, I'll just get started on my remarks here. So, okay, call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 58 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, pursuant to Standing Order 108, Bracket 2, and the motion adopted on Wednesday, January 12, 2022. The committee is meeting to discuss the inflation in the current Canadian economy. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to take make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Before we begin, members will have received the subcommittee report number 3 from the clerk this morning. Is everyone in agreement with it, and shall the subcommittee be adopted?
Mr. Chair.
Okay, I do see a hand up, and MP Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly appreciate the work that's gone in by the subcommittee and the clerk to have this report here today. Unfortunately, it's already out of date because as of today, the Bill C-30 was referred to our committee, and that means that we may need to make some alterations. Mr. Chair, I'm just going to be very brief here because I do know the subcommittee worked very hard to find a consensus, and so I would just simply add an amendment that that C-30 be heard on October the 3rd, that's this Monday, and that we receive the minister, officials, and have the parliamentary budget officer as a witness so parliamentarians can ask questions in regards to the bill, and that we also then allocate resources to do clause by clause. So if we could have an extended meeting on the Monday, that would be the intention here. And then the clerk would not be pulling all of his hair out because we would still have Wednesday to start the pre-budget consultations. So I hope that this is considered to be a friendly amendment, and that we can just simply say, if everyone agrees, that we'll work a little harder on Monday night to get that tax relief to the Canadians that are identified in the bill. Then I think we can move forward with the rest of the sub-report.
Thank you, MP Albus, and I hope that is seen as a friendly amendment. And I do understand, yes, that C-30 has been referred to committee. I have MP Beach.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would consider that particular amendment friendly, and I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for everybody that sits on our subcommittee for organizing a very good schedule. And I would like to thank Mr. Albus, but also Mr. St. Marie and Mr. Blakey. I think that the way that we prioritized our issues, including the clause in the subcommittee report that says that this particular measure that is going to give tax savings to Canadians by giving them a doubling of their GST is an absolute priority. And I would expect, although I'm willing to sit longer on Monday if necessary, that if there is agreement and if that list is the fulsome list, that we could actually probably get the minister testimony from the PBO and clause by clause committed within our normal time period. But I'm certainly willing to sit longer if necessary to get it done by Monday to be able to proceed to pre-budget consultations on Wednesday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Beach and MP Albus.
Yeah, just briefly, just to ask a question through yourself. I think MP Beach said the minister and the PBO, but we'd also like to have officials there in case there's a technical question. So the assumption would be that they would be there. Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Okay, so the minister, PBO, and officials, MP Blakey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say I'm supportive of the amendment that Mr. Albus suggested. This is something that New Democrats are very keen to see pass quickly, and so I'm very pleased that the committee has some good ideas and a great motivation across party lines to see this bill go through without any unnecessary delay. Thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was trying to raise my hand, but I was having a hard time.
With,
Oui,
on the screen.
donc je vais d'accord avec.
So I will agree with all of that, and I would like to congratulate everyone on their spirit of working together. I have another friendly amendment to better reflect the discussions at the subcommittee. This would be to add that the committee invite the Bank of Canada governor to appear before December 16th, 2022. So I agree with everything that was said, but I think we should also invite the governor, as was said at the subcommittee, before December 16th. So I will read it out in addition to everything that was said. So we would add that the committee invite the governor of the Bank of Canada to appear before December 16th, 2022. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, I see all thumbs up with that also. Okay, MP Samari, merci.
Thank you.
Okay, so the members, the subcommittee report as amended. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, great. Adopted. Excellent. So members, now we will move on to our first panel of witnesses. And I'm looking at the time. We do have a hard stop today at 6:30. And due to resources. So we have about 40-ish, 45 minutes for each panel, and that's how I will divide it up. So on the first panel, we have from the Retail Council of Canada, Vice President of Public Affairs, Carl Littler is with us. And from the Union des
Agricultural Producers Union,
we've got David Tugas, who's the coordinator of business economics, and the general president is with us also, Martin Caron. So for opening remarks, Mr. Littler for 5 minutes.
Thank you. On behalf of the Retail Council of Canada and its members, I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to provide a grocery industry perspective to your study on inflation. I also want to express our hope that this study will properly examine the root causes of inflation, its global context, and its many constituent parts. We here in Canada have little contemporary experience with inflation, which has been at historic lows for over 30 years. And one problem with this lack of modern experience is that some commentators are rushing to judgment or seeking to play the blame game for their own purposes, when we would be far better served by looking at the problem in all of its complexities. When it comes to food price inflation specifically, the issue needs to be understood both figuratively and literally from the ground up. The reason the prices have risen sharply on grocery shelves is a straightforward one. Vendors, those who are the manufacturers, processors, and wholesalers of food, have been raising rates repeatedly and almost across the board. That's overwhelmingly the biggest driver of higher prices on the shelf. That's not to castigate the vendors, it's simply a statement of fact. Why are these vendors' prices rising so rapidly? Because vendors' own costs are soaring, primarily because prices from farmers, growers, and importers have been increasing at unprecedented rates, and the farmers themselves have been hit hard, facing massive cost increases for fertilizer, fuel, and feed, among many others. What we have experienced is what we're experiencing still to some degree is a unique confluence of events: war, extreme weather events, and soaring fuel prices, all piling on top of supply chain disruptions and labor shortages that arose during the pandemic. The single biggest identifiable villain is Vladimir Putin's invasion that has struck at the grain and fertilizer exports of two of the world's biggest producers and also had effects on the price of fuel. Ukraine and Russia are the most affected, of course, but this has driven up the global price for these commodities. And grain is critical, not only for bread, staples like pasta, cereals, and cooking oils, but as the base for the majority of product in the core aisles of grocery stores. And also, very importantly, grain serves as feed for most animals raised for meat or for producing eggs and dairy. Simultaneously, scorching weather and drought have hammered fruit and vegetable producing regions on which Canada most relies, especially in California, but in the Canadian and American West more generally. That impacts not only the fresh produce section, but also canned, frozen, and preserved vegetables and fruits, sauces, juices, anything else in which these are ingredients. Drought and extreme heat also impact the availability of pasture land on which to graze animals. Dairy is supply managed, so the wholesale price is set here in Canada, rising by 10.9% cumulatively in 2022. Again, the government-established Canadian Dairy Commission has responded to rising costs at farm level for feed, fuel, and fertilizer, which are then passed on, first to processors and then to grocers. I could also speak to the rising cost of packaging, of shipping, of the role of the declining Canadian dollar, which is becoming more significant, and the severe labor market shortage, both here and abroad. Dire though this confluence of events is, there are some signs that the pace of inflation could abate, with August likely having been the high point. Grain is finally getting out of Ukraine, fertilizer and grain out of Russia under a United Nations brokered deal, though there's still a major backlog to be cleared. Fuel costs, though still high, have receded by close to 30% since their peak of a year ago. Cooling temperatures this fall could provide some relief to parched vegetable, fruit, and grain growing regions. But there's still uncertainty as to when exactly prices will stabilize, and of course, some big geopolitical and climatic risks. What's critical, both for industry and government, is to look at the whole picture, not just the surface, and to factor that into any policy approaches and commentary. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Monsieurs Caron and Tougas.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Martin Caron, General President of the UPA, Agricultural Producers Union. I'm also a dairy and field crop producer in Louisville in the Mauricie region. As you know, we are seeing historical inflation caused by a multitude of events. Combined, these elements have created a perfect storm that is driving commodity prices sharply up. The last time that the CPI growth rate was this high was in 1991. Of all the commodities in the Consumer Price Index, it is surely the evolution of Food Price Index that has attracted the most attention. However, food prices have evolved very similarly to the way the overall CPI has evolved since the beginning of the pandemic. Food prices in Canada have increased by 13% since January 2020, while the overall CPI increased by 11.5% over the same period. Some components of the overall CPI have risen faster than others, such as gas, with a 48% increase since the start of the pandemic. For the agricultural sector, input prices increased by 20% between the first quarter of 2020 and the first quarter of 2022, according to Stats Canada. 3 of the major production inputs, feed, fertilizer, and fuel, experienced price increases respectively of 100, 60, and 50%, much higher than the CPI. For horticultural production, the price of containers has also increased significantly. We also see an increase in fertilizer prices. And for the Quebec agricultural sector, these increases represent nearly $2 billion in additional annual expenses. This is unprecedented. It is important to remember that the price of agricultural products represent only a fraction of the price of food we find on grocery store shelves. For every dollar spent in Quebec on beef, for example, less than 38 cents goes back to the producers of steers and feeder calves. For yogurt, only 13 cents of every dollar spent by consumers goes back to dairy farmers. Historically high input prices mean an unprecedented drain on farm cash flow, even for commodities that operate in a more favorable market environment. Established farm businesses are not the only ones affected. Due in part to their higher debt load, next-generation businesses and startups are being hit hard by rising production costs. The Bank of Canada's desire to curb inflation through interest rate increases is commendable, but for the agricultural sector, this policy will just replace one problem with another. Farm businesses have had to invest massively in recent years to meet societal expectations regarding the environment and animal welfare. At the same time, the value of farmland has more than tripled over the last 10 years in Canada. This has resulted in a doubling of the agricultural sector's debt load over the past decade. Each 1% increase in interest rates will result in approximately $1.2 billion in additional interest expenses for Canadian farmers, which is equal to approximately 25% of the sector's total net income in 2021. When you consider the Bank of Canada's key interest rate has increased by 3% since the beginning of the year, you can imagine the colossal pressure on the agricultural producers. We need to act to prevent a catastrophe for the agricultural sector. Assistance could be modeled on the Canada Emergency Business Account, or CEBA, which would combine liquidity support and business profitability support. The government also must optimize the tools and programs that are already in place so they adequately respond to the current context. For supply managed productions, price adjustment mechanisms must be reviewed to make them more flexible. Inflation will certainly have a negative effect on the productivity and profitability of our companies and on their ability to invest in automation, robotization, and new technologies. These solutions to labor shortages and climate change require very significant investments, which inflation strongly discourages. The one-time assistance and the measures requested will help mitigate the financial impact on agricultural businesses, which must, at the same time, deal with historic increases and secure the food supply for Canadians. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Caron.
Thank you, Mr. Caron.
Witnesses, we are going to move into our first round of questions. The first round is 6 minutes of questions for each party. And just looking at the time already, the second round will be also evenly divided by the different parties, and it'll be about 2 minutes in the second round. So that'll be a quick question answer in the second round. So starting our first round, we have the Conservatives up first, and that is MP Lawrence for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for our witnesses all appearing today to talk about a very serious issue. And just to put some context early on, I would just read from some of the parliamentary notes here, some of the work done by the Dalhousie University Agri-Food Analytics Lab that shows that Canadian consumers are responding to higher food prices. According to the survey, up to 23.6% have cut back on the amount of food they purchase. 8.2% have changed their diet. 7% have even skipped meals. So this is a very serious concern and a very big issue. So my first question will go to you, Mr. Littler. So you described the fact you went through the supply chain of some of the additional costs that are being pushed up through the supply chain and then ultimately being pushed on to the consumer. But you didn't talk about any potential solutions there. So are there, in your estimation, Mr. Littler, any solutions to get costs back down for?
Well, there's certainly, I mean, a lot of this is geopolitical, but there are some domestic solutions, and some of those are being focused on by the industry itself. I think some of those are more within the preserve of policymakers, like this committee. Consumers are changing habits, including when they are purchasing food. So we're seeing a greater push to discount stores. We're seeing a greater push with respect to bulk purchasing where that's feasible. We're seeing some move to own brand private label products, and certainly in their discount arms, grocers are focusing on sort of core items in the grocery basket and trying to find the best the best prices that they can offer those products at. That's certainly something that
thank you very much. I'm going to just go through a couple other options I might throw out there, and I appreciate your efforts that government may have a direct role in perhaps reducing the cost. So given the fact that inflation is a large driver of this, and I think throughout history it would be proven that when governments spend too much and tax too much, you usually get inflation. If the government were able to reduce inflation, so for example, the governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem, said in response to one of my questions that one of the drivers of inflation would be carbon tax. So wouldn't it in fact help Canadians and help you reduce the prices for your consumers if the government didn't go ahead and triple the carbon tax this spring?
Well, I'm not an expert in the carbon tax per se, but there's no question that every input tax increase is having an impact, and that's true at taxation. Obviously, it's true in regulatory compliance, and so I think that frankly, in the way that items are assessed for gender impact, for environmental impact, I think it is probably time for the government to return, as it hasn't really since 1995, to putting things through an affordability prism, putting things through a consumer prism before policies are brought forward. That's not to say that the Competition Bureau doesn't do great work or that there isn't an Office of Consumer Affairs, but we have not had a minister with the name Consumer and Corporate Affairs in almost 30 years. And I mean, that does speak to some degree to the fact that inflation's been in abeyance. It is probably time to bring those impacts back to the fore.
I actually think that's an excellent idea, and one that I think the committee should be considered putting government regulations and taxation through an affordability lens. I think makes a lot of sense, given the fact, like I said, that the food prices are going up by 10%. On another related issue, so once again, and I'm inclined to agree with a lot of you said that the cost is being passed on from the increased inputs. This government also announced that they were going to cut fertilizer usage by a third. We've seen in Sri Lanka, I think is probably the ultimate example of this, where they cut fertilizer down to zero and their agriculture outputs have been reduced somewhere between 50 to 70%. By reducing the access to fertilizer and making fertilizer more expensive, obviously we've seen the events in Ukraine, but this self-inflicted wound would also increase the cost of food, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Caron is actually a farmer, so I defer maybe perhaps to his expertise. But again, obviously anything that is reducing supply, that is driving up cost is a concern, and it is a cumulative thing. There's all kinds of sort of virtuous things that government might be doing otherwise, but the cumulative effect and also the affordability impact, I think, are things that have to be much more prominent.
And I think that's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Lidler. Could Mr. Caron, if your members were unable to access the amount of fertilizer that they would need for their crops, would that hurt their yield, and would that in turn increase the cost of groceries for Canadian consumers?
Monsieur le Président, si je peux.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
Mais la première des choses, c'est qu'au niveau des engrais.
First of all, when it comes to fertilizer, there's also a link to the profitability of our products, and there's also different types of fertilizers. There also has been good evolution in fertilizer in Canada, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that when one wants to decrease the use of fertilizer, we have to do so carefully, because we have to take into account greenhouse gas emissions as well. And zero greenhouse gas emissions targets means that we have to be more productive when it comes to our crops, and fertilizer helps us to do that. So that is an important point I would like to draw your attention to. Also, when it comes to taxation, every time agriculture or agri-food is taxed, well, that is the Canadians' pantries being taxed. It is directly taxation on what Canadians buy to eat. So I don't think it is a good approach. When agriculture and agri-food is supported, it is also support to make sure Canadians will have healthy, affordable food. So that's the way to go. And I would also like to note grains. They are the basis of all food products.
Merci, and that's the time. MP Lawrence, thank you. Now we're moving to the Liberals. I've got MP Chattel for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There is no doubt there is a crisis with our climate that is leading us to a global food crisis. I do not think agriculture has ever been as important as it is today. In tandem, climate action must be taken, along with actions to prevent and to support our agricultural producers. They go hand in hand, and agricultural producers understand this very well. Mr. Caron, I know we've already discussed this, but the OCDE report that mentioned reforming agricultural processes to meet climate goals. It proposes to increase direct payments to agricultural producers who provide ecological services and products, or, for example, are involved in carbon sequestration. Do you believe that this is a good recommendation? Thank you for the question. Yes. I would say that our Canadian agricultural producers are mobilized with regard to this. And we are able to decrease our GHG emissions in this way. It does take significant investments. So having the ability to have direct funds to our producers here in Canada, as is done in Europe and elsewhere, that would help us to battle inflation, because our businesses have already begun to invest. And when one invests, one accumulates debt. So we do need support. It is very important to us as agricultural producers in Canada, because we know that as interest increases, we will become more fragile. And this could demotivate or demobilize this action that they have been taking. Before we become green agriculture, we need to make sure that our businesses are not in the red. Thank you, Mr. Caron. I recently saw a tractor. It's a new bioactive technology. And I know that agricultural producers have tried it this year, and it has resulted in much more fruitful harvests. So speaking of technology, it's very important to invest quickly in that. Thank you. I also have a question for Mr. Littler. I read a very alarming report on climate change and droughts in the southwest of the United States, which is a breadbasket for us. We import heavily from that region. Drought is catastrophic. What would the impact of that be on the food crisis?
Well, I mean, it's already being felt. It's a significant, in California is obviously a massive source of fruits and vegetables, particularly as the seasons roll. But it's, there have been droughts in Western Canada as well. And of course, weather events of all kinds in British Columbia. And it's not just the fruit and vegetable side. I mean, it affected egg producers in BC as a case in point. So no question that the climatic events are having a significant impact on this. I think, somebody described California's experience as a heat dome and the worst weather in history. So it is a severe risk.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. In conclusion, I would say that climate action on farms is essential. Carbon taxing is one tool that we have, but we need to use all possible tools, including investments, and acting otherwise would simply be irresponsible. Thank you.
MP Chatel, you still have a minute and a half.
Wow, la première fois.
Wow, that's the first time. Well, thank you. I will take advantage of that to change subject. So, Mr. Caron, you mentioned the labor shortage in the agricultural sector. What are your thoughts on the Confiance program? Thank you for the question. I think this program is extremely positive, and we need to make sure the administrative burden is decreased. to bring in foreign workers to Canada. They support our labor source, so it's great when there are programs to help us have equivalent, full-time equivalent, workers in Canada. Flexibility in this program is very helpful because we do need workers. Question. And automation will not replace all workers. Is that correct? Absolutely. Because producers do not have the means to pay for all of those investments. So yes, we are still using labor. But for us, the priority is to foster local employment in our regions. But as I said, the reality is, as I said.
MP Chatel, and now we'll have questions from the bloc, and MP Samari for 6 minutes, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Caron, Mr. Tuga, Mr. Littler, good evening. Thank you for being with us. My questions will be for Mr. Caron, and if Mr. Tuga would like to add anything, please go ahead. Thank you for your opening remarks with very informative content. And please don't be shy to come back to certain points and reiterate them if you deem them important. In general, we're talking about inflation here. People are seeing food prices increasing at the grocery stores. Mr. Caron set it out for us. It's very clear. Your input prices are increasing, so naturally that moves up the line. Input prices are increasing, but the farmland prices have tripled in the past 10 years. It's unbelievable. And you also said there have been significant investments in recent years and still ongoing for automation and also to ensure animal well-being and new environmental standards. We also see the Bank of Canada's governor's monetary policy to appease inflation his approach has been to increase interest rates. And there is so much capital in the agricultural sector. We can see how the numbers are affected for your workers by monetary policy. We know that our agricultural producers work hard. They don't have it easy. Often they are isolated, and they likely have difficult personal circumstances in this context. Can you tell us about how is morale in your troops with this inflation crisis? Thank you. I'll begin and I will let David add something if he would like. So the situation is worrying. Our businesses, for example, our startups are having a hard time because inflation is at 3%. It makes up $1.2 billion in additional expenses, and I know that it's necessary to act swiftly. It's important to be productive and competitive. That is what is often asked of us. But I look at our American counterparts. Money was quickly injected into agriculture because it is known that agriculture is foundational. I would like to add something, Mr. Caron. In the introductory remarks, it was mentioned that farmland prices have tripled. There is obviously a link. 80% of agricultural business assets are tied to their land. So it is an essential asset to agricultural production. And when such an asset triples in value, this explains a large part of the difficulties along with the new expectations. This explains a large part of the debt. Thank you. So we know agriculture is the foundation of a nation, and it needs to continue to be recognized. This is extremely important economic activity, and we must support our agricultural producers. Now, Regarding rising interest prices, rising costs, and the concerns surrounding that, what about profitability? Can you comment on your profits? I would also be interested at next generation agricultural businesses. Mr. Caron, you mentioned younger workers in your sector. And I would also have a few quick rapid fire questions. Before the last elections in 2021, we ended up passing a bill to facilitate the sale of businesses, including agricultural businesses, to family members. The government did not want to move forward. We worked at the committee during the summer, and the government said that the terms and conditions would be changed, and we didn't have a directive from the government, so progress couldn't be made. Has this been facilitated for you because of the new bill? Can you tell us, or is it still problematic? Thank you. Thank you for the question. I will begin, and David can add on. What we had asked for was to have incentives, and I want to, first of all, remind people that the average age of agricultural producers in Canada is approximately 56 years of age. So we know that there's going to be a wave of retirees, and we have to think about that right away. Incentives are necessary, and oftentimes donations by parents are made to children. And often this is done to people who don't even come from the agricultural sector. David? Also for the increases that we saw that Mr. Caron mentioned, we've seen a 25% increase, or rather it depends on what types of products the agricultural producers choose. And it's like the sort of Damocles hanging over the heads of our producers, knowing that they might need to take out another loan when there's such a high interest rate. It has an impact on the liquidity of our farms in Canada. Thank you.
And now we will have questions from the NDP. MP Blakey for 6+ minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our witnesses for being here today, in particular, Mr. Littler, on behalf of Canada's grocery retailers. I will say I think it would have been nice to see some folks from those companies directly, just because I think some of the questions that members of the committee may have liked to ask would be best answered by folks who have a command of the details of the individual businesses that have different business models, are recording different profits as against previous years. And I hope maybe we'll be able to get into a little bit of that. But of course, it's always better to get it directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I guess the basic problem for a lot of Canadians is they try to understand the experience they're having at the grocery store. They're going to buy their usual basket of goods. Some folks are having to put things back on the shelf. We've talked already today about the extent to which people are certainly looking at changing the composition of that basket in order to be able to make their grocery shopping fit within their household budget in these difficult times. And as they're having that experience in the grocery store, in the news, we're often hearing reports of higher profits by grocery chains, higher dividends being paid out to their shareholders. Many large retailers are contemplating share buybacks now with the extra capital that they have on hand from the higher profits that they've been making. And I am using the word profit intentionally. It's not just that the revenues have gone up, as one would expect. If they have higher costs and they have to pass that on to the customer, you would expect them to have higher revenues, but not higher profits. So for the Canadian who's trying to understand the news reports that they're hearing about large grocery retailers posting record profits and their shareholders enjoying record revenue from their shares. What is the explanation for that, if not that some of these price increases are exceeding the increase in costs that grocery retailers are seeing? Oh, I believe you're on mute, Mr. Littler.
Yeah, Mr. Littler, yeah.
Apologies. I think it's important for us to put grocery profits in context. Grocers make less than 5% typically on their operations and 3% on average. That's a lower rate than just about any other industry, certainly lower than the big food manufacturers and big agriculture. So, taking on the notion that this in any way represents an excess profit is a bit hard for me to sort of absorb. With respect to the profits specifically, it's really important to understand that the big driver on the profitability side, not the price side, but on the profitability side over the last year has actually been the recovery of health and beauty and pharmacy. And that's in large measure because people have been coming back into the workforce. They've been going out again. They've been purchasing all manner of those goods. And those are typically higher margin goods. A number of commentators recently in the executive ranks of grocers have said that, frankly, operating margin in groceries specifically is flat, and a number of CEOs have even talked about the fact that they are absorbing some of the prices that are arising from vendors and actually not fully passing them on to consumers.
Here's a question. I mean, you've said that historically grocery retail has lower profit margins than other industries. Do you think this is the time for grocery retailers to be trying to change that?
Well, I don't think they are changing it in a market way, and I think that they're all looking very, very closely at food costs and affordability. So I think that does factor into their mix. I guess you have to put it in perspective. I mean, you had $17.1 billion of sales in the two major grocers that have reported for the second quarter. And the variability, it was upward of 22 million on that, is about 1/1000th. So of the sales, and I think that that's an important context. And again, it's being driven primarily by health, beauty, and pharmacy. It's not actually coming from the food side of the grocery business.
Well, let me put the question this way. You've talked about the kind of bounce back of some other aspects of grocery retailers' business that isn't the kind of core grocery amount. But was there any time since the beginning of the pandemic when these grocery retailers saw their profits plunge? Other than, I mean, even in the initial days of the pandemic, we saw a lot of, what people would spend at restaurants and things like that, instead being spent at grocery stores. So is that story of the bounce back of those other products the story of the 2021 profits, as well as the profits that we're seeing already in 2022? Or when would you say that bounce back narrative begins to explain those extraordinary profits? Because it does seem to me that there was a time when we continued to see strong profit growth in the grocery retail industry, even before some of those other products were bouncing back. Could you speak to that context, please?
I can, and the numbers certainly on profitability for 2021 and 2022, same quarter year over year, are actually very, very comparable at 3.4%. I think people need to understand that the pandemic did not necessarily bring strong profit growth. It brought strong sales growth because obviously the restaurant sector was closed, people were at home more. But it also brought massive cost increases, particularly on the compliance side. And so it wasn't a case of grocers making out especially well during that period on a profitability basis.
Okay. I guess, again, what's difficult to square there is that we do see reports of increased profit in grocery retail. So I hear what you're saying, that the growth in profit could have been larger if there wasn't some corresponding growth in costs that was pandemic related. But there is a pretty consistent story of profit growth through the last number of years. So I'm just, wanting to make sure that we don't miss that point either. We are talking about an industry that has seen consistent and strong profit growth and apparently believes that growth in profit is going to continue, or we wouldn't see, large increases in dividend payments and plans for share buybacks. That's something that a business does if they anticipate continuing to have strong growth. So I wonder how it is that we explain that kind of strong posturing on the part of grocery retailers in a context where, if I understand you right, their gains in profitability may be more tenuous than news articles seem to report.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, sorry.
Very quick, like 15-second answer, please.
I think that you need to look back to 2017. Actually, the numbers were comparable then. If anything, there was a dip in profits in the run-in period and into the pandemic. And so you'll see that actually they're quite comparable to what they've been in the past. And of course, now driven by non-food items primarily.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, MP Blakey. Members, second round, really, we only have enough time for one question and an answer from the witnesses. We're starting with the Conservatives, and I've got MP Albus for the question and one answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And inflation is one of the most important issues facing Canadians. It's very serious as the cost of government has been driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of Liberal deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. And the new Conservative leader has said that he will put Canadians first, their paychecks, their savings, their home, their country, and it includes capping government spending and cutting waste to cut inflationary deficits and taxes, and removing gatekeepers so our farmers, businesses, and workers can provide homes, food, energy, and other essentials at an affordable price. So I would like to start with asking the Retail Council. There have been some politicians that have stood up and said that greedflation is happening. Are you seeing that in grocery prices, and would you refute those claims?
Certainly refute those claims based partly on the profit figures that we've just discussed. And I think more responsible observers have said that recently. That's certainly true of Professor Mohanram at U of T. If I can cite directly from Sylvain Charlevoix, who you'll see shortly, so you could ask him about it. They looked into the profits of major grocers over the past 5 years, and they found no evidence of profiteering. The quote is, "If greedflation exists, the available data suggests that grocers are not responsible." And even the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is now backpedaling somewhat and indicating we're getting some mixed signals now. The most recent financial results from the grocery retail industry do weaken the case that greedflation is taking place.
Thank you. And now, thank you, MP Albus. Moving to Liberals, one question, one answer, please. Liberals.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the
MP Zarowitz. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the presenters for being here today. I guess a two-part question, and maybe this is directed to Mr. Littler. What's the impact that Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine had on food prices in Canada and around the world? That's part one. And two, the other thing I've been a little worried about, and I think the question earlier went to our other guest, the Union des Producteurs Agricoles. But what is the impact in terms of labor shortages within the retail sector and its impact on food prices? Thank you.
So there's a lot to chew on. Obviously, on the Russia side, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's huge. Ukraine, I'm going by memory here, is the fourth largest exporter of wheat, and I want to say the second largest exporter of corn, but I might be off on that. Russia is definitely the world's largest exporter of wheat and fertilizer, and of course, they've been playing tit-for-tat games around sanctions. That is now coming out, but it has colossal impacts on not only feed for animals, but also the multitude of products that are, that are made from grain. Bread's the most obvious. It's a very, very, very extensive list. And it's, frankly, impacting on the broader macro picture and what's happening with regard to, sort of monetary support. It's happening with respect to petrochemicals and the price of fuel. So it is... I can get a headphone that sits properly.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Zarowitz. And now from the Bloc, MP Samari.
Oui, alors moi, ce serait une question.
My question will be have 5 parts. No, I'm just kidding. It will be one question. Thanks again to the witnesses for being here and for your presentations and for answering our questions. Mr. Caron, in your remarks, you mentioned that the government could use certain supports to help agricultural producers in the inflation crisis and also to help lower food prices. Could you briefly re-explain that? Thank you for everything. Thank you. We mentioned an emergency account. The CEBA account existed during the pandemic. It could be modeled on that. And when it comes to this emergency account, there was a loan, and after 3 years, the producers reimbursed a given portion. So there is support, and if the businesses reimburse that amount in 3 years, they could have credit for that up to 25%. And this helps maintain the businesses. And as you know, agricultural producers invest in Canada's pantry. Thank you very much.
Merci, MP.
Thank you, Mr. Sainte-Marie.
MP Blakey, and this will be our final question for this panel. MP Blakey, question and one answer.
Thank you very much. Well, let me just start with a brief statement that I hope will be of benefit to the committee, which is that the question of greedflation is not just a question about retailers in grocery. It is a question that applies to a much broader cross-section of the economy and other industries as well. There are those who would say that government largesse and financial support for Canadians is solely to blame for inflation. Mr. Littler, is it the case that grocery prices have been going up because people, for instance, are getting a doubling of the GST rebate or some support with childcare prices? Is that why grocers are raising their retail? Like, is it because there's so much demand that they're raising their prices? Or do we actually have supply-driven inflation that's relatively insensitive to the extent of demand? And once again,
you're on mute, Mr. Littler. Yes, please.
I wouldn't posit that income supports are the major driver here. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world that's driving this, and it is climatic. It is obviously geopolitical. There are clearly some demand issues and supply problems with respect to agricultural capacity in the face of all these challenges, but I would not attribute it to the fact that there are income support programs.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, MP Blakey. And thank you to our witnesses. I want to thank our first round panelists. And we are going to move into our second panel as we do not have much time. Members, we're going to suspend at this time as the clerk brings on our witnesses for the second panel. By video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses for this second panel. And as an individual, we have Armine Yalnizyan, and she's the Director of Research of Community Social Planning Council of Toronto. From the Agri-Food Analytics Lab, we have Sylvain Charlebois, He's the director and professor there. And from the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, we have Timothy Ross with us, the executive director. And we'll start with Madame Yalin Zian, and for 5 minutes, please, for your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Chair Fonseca. And I would just like to correct the record that I have not been with the Social Planning Council for many years. I'm an economist and the Atkinson Fellow on the Future of Workers. And I am actually located in beautiful
Merci, my apologies.
No problem. I want to thank the committee for inviting me to your discussion on measures that can address inflation, particularly with regard to food affordability. Members of the committee, it is a terrible time to be poor or living on fixed income. And that is the case for millions of Canadians who rely on social assistance, old age pensions, or low wage jobs that haven't seen a pay rise over the last year. And that's particularly difficult if you are also living in a remote location or on an Indigenous community where 3 in 10 households struggle with the high costs of food. Statistics Canada has told us that 16% of Canadian households, that's more than 1 in 6 households, 6 million Canadians were food insecure last year, a lower number than the previous year because of emergency-related benefits from the federal government for the pandemic. This year, those sources of income have dried up, but food prices have started escalating and are now at rates of increase we haven't seen for 40 years. At last count, children and young adults, that's people under the age of 35, had the highest rate of extreme food insecurity. What does that mean? It means they were missing 1 or more meals on a regular basis because they couldn't afford to eat. More hungry people live on their own than with other people, and more are renters than owners. And all of these people have fewer resources to draw on to survive. Meanwhile, demand for food banks has tripled on a monthly basis compared to last year in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto Area. And they are serving over 180,000 people every month. Keeping the shelves stocked for these food banks has increased 6-fold over last year, costing $13 million on an annualized basis, right as gifts of money and food have dried up because of the price squeeze. I don't know what keeps you up at night, but I lie awake at night thinking about how much worse it's going to get this fall. As the Bank of Canada's rate hikes increase pressures to raise rents, as world developments just mentioned drive up the price of fuels and basic commodities needed, and on the fuel front, heating, transportation, and production are all affected. As the escalation of food prices shows no signs of plateauing, particularly when it comes to food bank staples like pasta and bread, let alone fresh produce or meat, it is clear to me that more people are going to have to opt for hunger to hang on to their housing because, let's be clear, there isn't any place cheaper to go to. And more people are going to get sicker quicker and turn to a healthcare system that itself is on life support these days. So what can you do? Given that the government coffers across Canada, provincially as well as federally, and around the world have swollen in part due to inflation, some jurisdictions like the United Kingdom abroad and Saskatchewan at home have offered broad tax cuts. That approach, to paraphrase the International Monetary Fund and borrow words from the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, pours fire on fuel on the inflationary fire and actually generates more inequality. Should we do nothing because doing something, doing anything, could be inflationary? That would simply be cruel and inhumane, particularly at a time when coffers are growing. This isn't about inflation. This is about survival for millions of Canadians. We can do much more than we are doing now, and here are 5 short-term actions I would like you to consider. The federal government could introduce a temporary food supplement tied to existing credits like the GST credit, the Canada Child Benefit, or the Canada Workers Benefit. That infrastructure for advancing the money is in place. All of these programs could be made more timely in their responsiveness by introducing quarterly indexing instead of annual indexing. Please do not revert the EI system to the pre-pandemic model, which will affect the lowest paid workers the hardest. The one-time supplement to the housing benefit, which has just been recently offered, could be increased or renewed. And you could offer more support to the nonprofit sector to underwrite the costs of food banks and permit community-based groups help people navigate the system of supports. All of you around this table have financial advisors. People in low income rely on such organizations to literally save lives. So you can address affordability in the medium and long term too, through other measures that support incomes, services, supply chains, and infrastructure. You could also create a consumer bureau that monitors pricing trends in key industries as vigorously as the Competition Bureau monitors the impact of mergers and acquisitions on market performance. Those ideas can be discussed later, but for now, I want to reinforce that you have plenty of room to act today, fiscally and morally, with immediate action. I do welcome your questions, and I thank you again for the opportunity to be part of your discussions.
Thank you, Ms. Nalisian. And now we're going to hear from the Agri-Food Analytics Lab and Monsieur Charlebois, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I would like to thank the committee for inviting me again. Canada's food inflation has exceeded our inflation rate for 13 straight months now. While some Canadians are coping, many are struggling. Within the G7, Canada currently has the third lowest food inflation rate at 10.8% in food retail. Only Japan and France have lower food inflation rates right now. But that doesn't help families here in Canada. Almost 8% of Canadians are now skipping meals due to higher food prices, and nearly 24% of Canadians are simply buying less food, according to a recent report we just released. Of that group, almost 70% are women, which likely means many Canadians are making daily dietary compromises due to food inflation. As a result, accusations of gouging in the food industry have reached an all-time high. According to a recent survey, almost 80% of Canadians believe food corporations are taking advantage of the inflationary cycle to increase prices. And it's not just in retail. Both Quebec and British Columbia have class action lawsuits against the beef industry, and now many groups are asking the federal government to investigate. We have investigated this matter ourselves in groceries with the help and support of 3 colleagues of mine, Samantha Taylor, Stacey Taylor, and Janet Music. The fact remains that any evidence of greedflation in food retail in Canada is weak at best. That said, some prices in some categories have behaved unreasonably in recent years, in animal proteins in particular. Accepting that greedflation exists and accusing companies of being abusive, though, is the easy part. Where it gets challenging is to set thresholds. How much is too much? Is it 4%? Is it 5%? 10%? Where should the line be? A potential code of conduct for grocers and vendors could also make things easier for government to access and provide some oversight if the proper governance is implemented. Assessing Canada's food affordability situation will also be key moving forward. And regarding food affordability, one index does exist around the world. It's called the Global Food Security Index. It's made up of a set of indexes from more than 120 countries. Since 2012, the index has been based on 4 main pillars: food access, safety, sustainable development, and food affordability. Again, Canada ranked well this year, 7th globally. Where Canada's performance is of some concern is in food affordability. This measure is dedicated to consumers' ability to purchase food, their vulnerability to price shocks, and the presence of programs and policies to support consumers when shocks occur. Canada fell 1 spot again this year to number 25 in the world. Australia, Singapore, and Holland topped the list in food affordability. Given the resources and food access we have in Canada, we should do better. Higher food prices at the grocery store over the past year have been difficult for many of us to accept. Canada needs a food autonomy policy to make our food economy less vulnerable to macro events. With a stronger food processing sector and better logistics domestically as well. Une meilleure autonomie alimentaire.
Greater food autonomy in Canada requires better support for the food processing sector. The most important strategic anchor for a food chain remains processing. It is just as easy to support our farmers here in Canada as it is to innovate to meet the needs of Canadians. Buying local should also be a priority across Canada. For example, the work done by Aliments du Québec or Quebec Foods is a model for all of Canada. Over the years, the promotion of local products has led to an increased demand for products that come from Quebec, creating economies of scale. These products can aspire to be sold outside of the province, where there are certainly consumers who want a little bit of Quebec on their plates. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Monsieur Charlebois.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois.
Here from the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, Mr. Tim Ross, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the chair and the committee for the invitation to appear here today. I'm going to make a few points about housing cooperatives in the context of high inflation environment. I'm going to speak about their affordability, security of tenure, and strong sense of community. Many Canadians know about renting and owning, but there's another alternative. Today, 250,000 Canadians are members of housing cooperatives, owning their homes together from coast to coast to coast. Co-op housing is more affordable than market rental housing because the vast majority of co-ops operate on a not-for-profit basis, resulting in smaller year-over-year rent increases. And because they're mission-driven, their affordable rents will be affordable forever and generally able to become more affordable over time. Co-op housing offers security of ownership. There is no outside landlord who might sell, move in, or has incentive to rent-evict. And co-op member ownership means that you have a real say in how your community is run. Co-ops are inclusive by design. Almost all operate on a mixed income model with a portion of members paying an economic rent that allows the co-op to balance its books and support members with so low incomes paying a subsidized rent through rental assistance provided by governments. Beyond a mix of income levels, co-ops typically reflect the diversity of their communities in which they're located. They make decisions through democratic processes that engage all members, something that doesn't happen in private rental housing. Co-ops are also strong communities. During the pandemic, we've witnessed countless stories of neighbors helping neighbors with childcare, groceries, and other acts of mutual aid that money just can't buy. However, for the vast majority of Canadians today, a solution to their housing crisis will not be found in a co-op. With reasonable rents and security of tenure, existing co-ops rarely have vacancies, and very few new co-ops have been built in recent years. The co-op homes that exist today are largely a product of robust and dedicated federal programs that supported their development, primarily through the 70s and through to the 90s. This is when the first generation of co-op housing was built. And it continues to pay dividends today in providing security, affordability, and dignity for households and communities across the country. And if we want to share this security and dignity and affordability with more households, we need to make sure that housing co-ops are part of the supply mix in Canada and support the development of new housing cooperatives. That's why we're quite pleased with the news announced in the recent federal budget to launch a new co-op housing development program that sets us on a path to building new and much needed co-op homes. I want to reinforce the fact that co-ops are more affordable than market rents and more stable year-over-year cost increases. Moderate rents in co-op housing over the long term contrast with the trend we're seeing in Canada's rental markets, rapidly escalating rents that mean fewer housing options affordable to low and moderate income households. We recently undertook a longitudinal study comparing rents in co-ops to rents in private market buildings in Victoria, Vancouver, Edmonton, Toronto, and Ottawa from 2006 to 2021. The results were stark in that we found that co-op housing charges are consistently lower than rents in comparable buildings in the private market by 1/4 to 1/3, and that gap actually widens over time. This represents hundreds of dollars per month and thousands per year left in people's pockets to buy healthy food, put the kid in sports, to advance education, or to save for retirement. So if you are looking for solutions to help Canadians in this high inflation environment, this needs to start at home, and it needs to start with more co-op housing development. With the minute that I have left, I do also want to recognize that tomorrow is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And it's in this context that we need to recognize that Indigenous housing needs are disproportionate to the rest of the country. And we must see an accelerated focus on the development of a by Indigenous, for Indigenous, urban, rural, and northern housing strategy that is fully supported and fully funded by the federal government. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today, and we look forward to working together to build a successful co-op housing development program so that more Canadians can have a safe and affordable place to call home in co-op housing.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. And I do want to apologize to our witnesses and to our members in advance due to House resources. We only have till 6:30. We do have a hard stop, members and witnesses. So we will only have one round, and it'll allow for about 5.5 minutes for each of the parties to ask questions. We are going to start with the Conservatives, and I have MP Goodridge. Welcome to our committee. MP Goodridge, in 5.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Merci à tous les.
Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here with us today.
So I'm the Member of Parliament for Fort McMurray Cold Lake, which is a riding in northern Alberta, and I was thinking about this as we were going through some of our testimony, that basically everything I eat comes up on a truck on Highway 63, and as gas prices increase, the price of everything I buy and everything that everyone in my community buys increases. And we know that the Parliamentary Budget Officer stated in a letter to this committee that the carbon tax was inflationary, adding approximately, or actually not approximately, adding 0.6% to Canada's overall inflation rate. So my question is to Mr. Charlebois. When it comes to food prices, do you have any statistics on how the carbon tax impacts food inflation?
So thank you for the question. I do get that question a lot. We don't have any evidence right now which would suggest that the carbon tax is influencing food prices retail. But it is a strong hypothesis. It is a strong possibility. We actually, as a lab, we applied for a grant to SSHRC to get the funding, the proper funding to look into this matter. And unfortunately, our grant was rejected. Our request was rejected, unfortunately. So we're going to go back at it again next year. I'm hoping, you see, at $50 a metric ton, there was no real debate about affordability, but we're slowly marching towards a carbon tax of $170 a metric ton. That's triple where we are now. And so I'm certainly concerned about food affordability because it affects all nodes of the supply chain. And so I think it's worthwhile looking into this matter. I was listening into the testimonial before the panel before this one, and the issue was raised looking at taxes through the affordability lens. I would suggest to do that with health as well. The Canada's Food Guide is actually less affordable than the old one, and nobody at Health Canada actually looked into it. We did, and we actually figured out that the second most downloaded document from the government of Canada suggests a diet that is actually more expensive than what we had before.
Wow, and it's unfortunate that you weren't able to get that grant. And frankly speaking, I'm no economist, but I don't understand if you're increasing input costs for food, grocery stores in terms of their utility bills, electricity bills, and all the like, how that wouldn't translate to higher cost of food. And I've talked to many farmers in my riding and throughout my province of Alberta that talk about the increase in cost of fertilizer and how that's having an impact on their production, and how these increased input costs are having a major impact. And we know that the government is adding to inflation and driving up the cost of living, specifically the spending, the out of control spending from the Prime Minister. And we have some of the highest inflation rates, and food is massive. I was wondering if you had any further thoughts when it comes to the idea around affordability and how government could perhaps get their spending under control so as to reduce inflation.
You raise a good point. Just going back briefly to the carbon tax issue with farmers, I actually did testify before Parliament on the former bill that didn't last due to an election. I think price takers, farmers, have to be looked at very differently. They have no other choice but to absorb more costs, and that's something that would need to be addressed, I think, as soon as possible by Parliament. Now, in terms of spending more from the government, again, the affordability bill, the affordability plan that we saw a few weeks ago from Ottawa did concern me quite a bit because right now the last thing we need is more spending, public spending, because it could absolutely add oil to the fire. Just because spending, I think we need to be wiser and be more targeted in terms of spending. And secondly, I think some fiscal measures would be welcomed by many Canadians.
So, Monsieur Charlebois, so are you saying that the carbon tax doesn't work in the farming sector, from your opinion?
I think it's an unfair tax for farmers because they just can't pass on extra costs to their clients. Essentially, they are essentially price takers. They don't set prices. The market does. Unlike processors and distributors, they have more control over their pricing, not farmers.
That's alarming, and I really appreciate you sharing this, and wondering if you have anything else that you'd like the committee to know before our time quickly elapses.
It's important to recognize that Canadians are actually going through a unique phenomenon right now when it comes to inflation. A lot of people are comparing 1981. 1981, the food inflation rate was actually over 10% for just a few months. Food inflation right now is lingering. It's been 13 months now that it has exceeded the general inflation rate, and it's not over. It will continue into the new year, unfortunately. So obviously, it's of great concern for many, many Canadians right now.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Goodridge. And that's the time. And now we're going to hear from the Liberals for questions. MP Baker for about 5.5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to ask Madame Chatel to begin the questioning, and then I'll take the remaining time.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Baker. A little question for Mr. Ross. Of course, you know, in rural regions, there is a housing shortage, a serious one. It's very difficult for them to access CMHC programs. And I know that you are working together with partners with the CMHC on a new cooperative housing program. Can you tell us how that can help smaller communities?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
The forthcoming program is still under discussion with CMHC, but we do have some thoughts about how to make rural housing development more workable in the context of national housing strategy programs. Some features that could look like a couple things. One is enabling the co-op sector to take a portfolio approach to realizing new co-op homes across the country. Developing a standalone co-op in a rural area has its challenges, but by taking a portfolio approach of having a community of cooperatives and cooperatives across many communities in a shared governance structure, we are seeing the viability of rural development increased as a result of that, particularly with some success in Nova Scotia lately. The other piece is there's a significant equity gap in the in the financing and the contributions available in a lot of national housing strategy programs. There is financing available, but in order to make projects viable and have a reasonable affordability level, a deeper level of grant or contribution can help with project viability. And then a third feature.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should.
Thank you. I can't take all of my colleague Mr. Baker's time, but thank you very much for those great suggestions.
Merci, Mme Chatel. If I may, I'd like to direct the remaining time. I think I have about 3 minutes left, if I'm not mistaken, Chair. I'd like to Mr. Charlebois again. Mr. Charlebois, just going back to the prior exchange with my colleague, you were talking about the fact that you were talking about the price on pollution and the fact that there are sort of price takers in the value chain. And you were also talking about the fact that you wanted to study what the impact of the price of pollution, the carbon tax, would be on end consumer prices, or if there is one. So that suggests to me that you're not sure if there is an impact on end consumer prices of the price on pollution. Is that correct? Because if you knew, you wouldn't need to study it.
Well, no, it's a fair question. You see, both BC and Quebec has had a carbon tax for a very long time, and we've never seen any anomalies when it comes to food prices in both provinces in over a decade. And so that's why whenever someone tells me, well, the carbon tax is a problem for food affordability, it's hard to see any evidence right now. But like I said, at $170 a metric ton, it's a different conversation.
Yeah, so I understand. So I can understand why it's worthy of study, but I hear you saying that there's no evidence yet of that it's impacting food prices.
And keep in mind, I am supportive of measures to mitigate climate change for sure. I think the carbon tax is an important policy, but at the same time, we need to evaluate exactly how Canadians are impacted at the grocery store.
Sure. Well, I mean, you went where I was going to go with the next question, Mr. Charlebois. What is the impact of the climate crisis, would you say, on the cost of food? Have you analyzed that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, a fair question. I wish I would have numbers to show you. I would say, I mean, obviously, climate change has an impact on agriculture every single year. Every year we publish Canada's Food Price Report. Our next report, our 13th edition, is coming out on December 7th. And climate change is the wild card. It's always difficult to predict, but obviously climate change will always push prices higher depending on the category. This year, we're looking at a very dry Europe and a very dry Asia as well. Now, we're faring better this year compared to last year, but you never know. The southern part of the U.S. also is quite dry. And now we're seeing today Ian devastating Florida, and we do buy a lot of food from Florida, especially citrus. So that may actually have an impact on prices over the next few months.
Is it fair to say, I've only got about 30 seconds left, but how would you, not having, I realize you don't have specific numbers, but what would be the cost, do you think, in the long term? What would be the impact on food prices in the long term if we didn't fight the climate crisis?
Very short answer, please.
Yeah, so essentially, we need a coefficient to evaluate how climate change is impacting the price of food. But like I said, I think we need to take control of the supply chain domestically to be less vulnerable to these issues.
Thank you. And thank you, MP Baker, MP Chatel. And now moving to the bloc and MP Samari for 5.5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Fonseca. So, Mr. Ross, Mr. Charlebois, and Ms. Yelnizyan, thank you for your participation, for everything that you have taught us. It's very interesting. My question is for Mr. Charlebois. I much appreciated your testimony last spring. I would like for you to give us an update on that, based on your knowledge. And so I wanted to ask you about the impact of weather events in the past months. You answered my colleague Yvan in a concerning way, but you gave us good content. I would also like an update on what the impacts of the war in Ukraine are on the possible increase in commodity prices and shortages, and the same thing for supply chains. Do we still have the same problems now as we did in the springtime? And how is that reflected in food pricing? And I would like to hear you talk about weather and the harvest. And as it stands for developing countries, when it comes to potential malnutrition, is this still a problem? And have you been looking at the United Nations global food study? Thank you very much. Yes, so very quickly, Ukraine still has an impact on our markets, but less so than last time we met. Since May 17th, prices have been decreasing, but we are expecting them to rise again. There will be weather events in Europe and Asia that will contribute to that. Ukraine feeds about 400 million people every year across the world. And we're seeing impacts from what is happening on wheat exports. Wheat represents 15% of all calories consumed across the planet. So deficits will have to be managed. There will be famine in northern Africa and in the Middle East in the coming months. That's the first question. Second question regarding developing countries. In regard to the UN study, we published a paper in Rome this week that showed, unfortunately, an increase in people who will die of famine around the world. There will not be enough food for these people, so this certainly does not bode well. And another question that I forgot, yes, it was the question on supply chains. So there were problems in the spring. What is the update now? Things are improving. Concerning containers, they're 40 to 50% less expensive. So maritime supply chains are improving. When it comes to land, things are less costly and more efficient because things have become more predictable, given the fact that public health measures are more predictable. This is very helpful to land transportation. Thank you very much. Another question. The Bank of Canada governor said that he will increase interest to fight inflation. As we heard, there's a lot of debt, especially in agriculture and in agricultural startups. Do you think there are concerns to be had about the increase of interest rates to fight inflation and its impacts on the agri-food sector, which have to take out significant loans? All sectors of the economy are affected, including agriculture, and agriculture has no choice but to invest. So it is certain that interest rates will have an impact on risk management. In my opinion, it's a good sign. I listened to Mr. Caron's testimony, and it's a good sign that agricultural producers are investing in their farms, which they do increasingly. Okay, thank you. And last question, I'm coming back to your remarks. You mentioned the importance of buying local, and you gave Quebec as an example. You said processing needs to be improved. That's what you said just before that. Could you give us examples of what could be done and how the government could better support that? Thank you. So a lot of exports are taking place of basic products, and Quebec has a good system, and that system is more based on processing than exporting. And in Montreal, Kraft Heinz is a good example. It left the market in 2013, and now it's coming back in Montreal. It invested in Winnipeg. There's also the example of Rocket in Winnipeg. So we are seeing a movement towards Canada, but we must be very proactive. Thank you.
Merci, MP Sainte-Marie. And now just to close off actually this meeting and this round will be the NDP and MP Blakey for 5+ minutes.
Well, thank you very much to all our witnesses. I'm sorry we don't have more time because I think there's a lot we could glean from the inside of our witnesses. So I'm gonna try to pack as much in as I can. Ms. Yalnizyan, I wanted to know, we've heard a little bit about different kinds of income support packages in the context of inflation and what effect it may or may not have in accelerating inflation. What we haven't talked a lot about are some of the provincial plans. So here in Manitoba, a family with an income of $175,000 or less, which isn't, I don't think meets any definition of a low-income family, will be receiving between $200 to $250 per child. We saw in Saskatchewan, Premier Moe there promised $500 per household. We've seen in Ontario and Alberta gas tax cuts. We haven't heard a lot of criticism in Ottawa about those things, but we have heard a lot of criticism about the NDP's proposal for doubling the GST rebate for the Canada Housing Benefit, for assisting with the costs of things like dental and childcare. And I wonder if you could comment on those differences of approach and give your opinion as an economist in terms of which approach would be most likely to add to inflation, if indeed any of them would.
I'm very struck by that. Thank you for your question. I'm very struck by the degree of inconsistency in the criticisms, in the regard of carbon taxes being inflationary, and yet things like giving $500 per household not being inflationary. It boggles the mind. The IMF literally said yesterday to the UK that provided a tax cut package that was extremely large in recent memory and was not targeted, giving those at the top far more money than those at the bottom, that it was not only inflationary, that it would accelerate existing income inequalities. There you have it. I'm not as good an economist as the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and I cede my criticisms of broad-based tax cuts to the assessment by the International Monetary Fund that this would be like pouring gasoline on an inflationary fire, to have broad-based tax cuts, whether you're cutting the carbon tax, whether you're cutting gas taxes at the pump, whether you're just throwing money at people like Mobucks circulating through the system. And yet I can see how when government coffers are inflated because of inflation itself, the temptation would be very strong to see jurisdictions like Ontario and Alberta that flipped over within a matter of weeks from deficit to surplus. The temptation would be very strong to cut taxes broadly and put money in your pockets to deal with this. We need to target the resources. So to your point, Member Blakey, that the idea that you have been able to work with the Liberals to increase the GST credit, to increase the housing benefit at least one time, to target these measures is something that economists around the world are saying is the smartest thing to do if you're going to provide any help at all. And you really should, when it means that more people are going to go hungry.
Well, thank you very much. And I understand that you do have an article where you talk about the issue of food prices. I want to ask my next question to Monsieur Charlebois, but I wonder if you might be willing to table that with the committee.
Surely.
Thank you. Monsieur Charlebois, you'd said earlier that you think Canada needs a much better, in fact, I think if I could put words in your mouth, we need a food strategy at all. It seems to me that we don't really have any kind of meaningful public policy, at least not something we could call a strategy when it comes to food. And you had talked about needing to emphasize more processing here at home. I'm just wondering if you can speak to what that looks like. I mean, often debates around food policy in Canada are dominated by discussion of international trade agreements. Usually the thrust, even by producers, is to liberalize trade, to have less of a presence of kind of public policy in the sector, but to try and deregulate international markets and expand access based on less rules overall, and therefore less direction in terms of what kind of work would be done in Canada. So for instance, value-added processing versus initial production of food resources. How do you think Canada, that for such a long time under Liberal and Conservative governments has really pushed a free trade agenda on food, could bring us into a space where we have a meaningful national food strategy?
Yeah, so first thing, we need to stop flying in the dark. We need data. Right now, a lot of people are saying all sorts of things without really any data. I had the pleasure to work in Europe and in the US. Getting data is much easier than in Canada. Canada, we heavily rely on Statistics Canada, which needs an overhaul when it comes to the CPI report, when it comes to understanding inflation, when it comes to understanding trends. Statistics Canada is not well resourced. Clearly, that would be my starting point for better food policy. And secondly, I would say we kind of have a committee already created to come up with a food policy or food autonomy strategy for Canada. We have a food policy council that was appointed more than 2 years ago, and we haven't heard anything from the council at all in more than 2 years. So I certainly would go there and set up some sort of process that would lead to a policy of some sort. Right now, there's nothing. And thirdly, if I may, interprovincial barriers are killing smaller markets. We need to address this issue as soon as possible. Right now, it's impossible for, say, companies in PI or Nova Scotia to have a shot at doing well, which really generates more poverty in rural Canada. So that's one thing that we need to address in that policy as soon as possible.
Thank you
very much for those
and
thoughts.
Thank you, and merci, MP Blakey, and to our witnesses. Just on behalf of the committee, we wish we had more time, and we really apologize again that time was short this time due to House resources. But we do want to thank you for informing our inflation study and for being before us here on behalf of the clerk and the analysts and the interpreters and everybody, all of the staff here. We thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
you.